welcome back to The Buzz. I'm Bailey Barnes, and today I'm sitting with Gene Nichols of Nichols Pina, LLP. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely, I'm glad to be here.
Great. So I know you guys go over, or you guys cover a lot of different areas of law. What are some of the different areas that you guys represent and help with?
Sure. So Bailey, I formed this law firm 5 years ago with my law partner, Ted Pina. Ted and I grew up together. We went to Episcopal High School here in town together and have been practicing law now for 5 years with each other. I've been practicing for close to 20 years, and he's been practicing for close to 22 years. Ted's practice is a personal injury practice. What he does is he handles automobile accidents, people who were killed in accidents, people if medical malpractice is committed, anything that you hear a lot on TV. We do all of that work. What we also do is a tremendous amount of a criminal practice. I've had a criminal practice in Jacksonville for almost 20 years. The majority of my practice is DUI work. I represent people who get arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I also handle matters, juvenile matters, adult matters, all other crimes, but the majority of what I see on a regular basis is DUI. And then we have two other lawyers in the office, one who does family law work, so divorces, child custody, and the like. And then finally we have one other lawyer in the office. He is our young associate, who's my father, who's been practicing for 52 years. And he does real estate work, does wills and trusts, and he comes in whenever he wants and leaves whenever he wants.
So there's four of you throughout the office, and between the four of you, you cover pretty much every area of law to an extent.
Yeah, when Ted and I formed this firm, we wanted to create sort of the firm that everybody knew about 50 years ago when you would go to one lawyer for everything. Well, there's so much out there, it's very hard to go to one lawyer for everything anymore, but we've created a firm that the majority of problems, issues, good or bad, that you or a family member is going to face, you can give us a call and you don't have to go anywhere else. We have a lawyer who specializes in almost every issue that an individual would come in for, so we kind of become that one-stop shop. We are your Matlock for life, sort of the way we look at it.
The person to have in your back pocket at any time, basically.
At any time for whatever the issue is. That's exactly right. Well, I have a lawyer on staff who can help with just about any legal issue.
That's awesome. So I guess let's talk a little bit about like DUIs, and if someone was to get pulled over for the chance of possibly being in a DUI, should you blow into the meter and take like that test, or what would you say to do if you've had a few drinks and you are like leaving a bar and you get put in that circumstance?
Well, and that I get that question every time I go out, especially if I'm out at a bar. What do you do? And so the first thing I tell everybody is don't drink too much that you can't drive home. And today especially, with the different opportunities to get a ride home safely besides just a cab. So many people just for some reason are scared to call a cab. So with Uber and other applications, other ways to get home, obviously that's the first choice. After that, what I typically see are people who have had way too much to drink. Rarely do we see the people who go and have 2 beers. If you're going to go have 2 beers, if you're going to go have 2 glasses of wine, and that's all you're going to have, there's nothing wrong with you driving home. The law is very clear that you can drive, an adult who's over 21 can consume an alcoholic beverage and drive home as long as they are not impaired. So what I typically face, though, are people who have had way too much to drink and still got behind the wheel anyway. From my standpoint, whether you give a breath test or not is almost irrelevant, because it's the state attorney's job to prosecute your case. And you're going to run into a state attorney who, if you give a breath test that is 3 times the legal limit, they're not going to be happy with you. If you give a breath test, if you refused a breath sample and were unwilling to give one, they're not going to be very happy with you. So it's hard to say. Typically, most defense lawyers would say, don't do anything. Don't do exercises. Don't give a breath sample or anything along those lines. I sort of run the middle line of saying that is usually in your best interest, and typically if it's a matter of you're going to throw up on a police officer's shoes, yeah, I don't want you doing anything, but at the same time, there are officers who, if you are not impaired and you can perform well on the exercises, which a lot of people would suggest are hard to do, you may go home because you may not be impaired, and those tests would be able to show whether or not you are or not. So the general answer is, that was the long-winded answer, the general answer is don't get behind the wheel, but if you do, giving law enforcement more evidence against you is usually probably not in your best interest.
So talking about, you were talking about you guys represent juveniles as well. What are like the most common problems that they come to you with? Like, what are the most problematic things that these kids have been getting into?
Sure. So for decades, what we would see are juveniles who would get in trouble for typical small stuff. They'd steal the gum at the store.
Right.
Usually a lot of petty theft, just being young and immature and one person pressuring into another. Every once in a while there would be a fight, and along those lines of what my generation would see growing up, what my parents' generation would see. Today is very different.
Right.
We are seeing so many different issues with juveniles that are so much worse than what we have seen in the juvenile system before. And the biggest problem that we're seeing in the juvenile courts right now, and I would tell you the sheriff's office sees and the state attorney's office sees, are cell phones and the use of cell phones. And what is happening now is because of social media, because of the ability to share information through Kik and through Snapchat and so many other so many other applications and social medias, that young people are doing things with cameras that a generation before never would have dreamed of. So one of the things that we're seeing, and lawyers are seeing too much of, are young people videotaping, taking pictures of themselves, taking pictures without any clothes on, videotaping themselves in sexual acts, and sending it to other people. And it is a generation of flirtation, which is very different than what a generation before would have seen.
Right.
The problem with that is that even if you were 16 years old and you send a picture of yourself, you willingly send one to a girlfriend for fun or for a boyfriend to flirt with, or to friends and having fun, whatever it is, that is creation of child pornography. And children can create pornography and then they can distribute it, and it takes a click. And there's the feeling and the belief that it's not out there anymore. And with some media sites, we know, you guys know, that a lot of stuff can go away, but a lot of stuff does not. And the problem is when you're 15 years old and you send a video like that or a picture like that to somebody, it's going to spread. It's going to spread like it's going to spread like wildfire. And then you are no longer a generation ago the boy who was kissing too many girls or the girl who was kissing too many boys. You're now the female who has a picture of yourself out there that every school in town is going to find out about. You created that pornography, and you could face substantial and serious criminal charges.
What are the kinds of things you guys do to try and like help to fix those kind of issues, like to help them when they get in those like legal issues with that? Like, how do you go about changing what's going on?
Sure. Well, in my office with my criminal practice, I'm a big fan of telling folks that it's very important for me that when they leave my office, they leave better than when they came in. And so I don't know what that is sometimes. Sometimes that may be holding somebody's hand through the system. Sometimes that may be helping the parents with their child realize where the mistakes were made so those mistakes don't get made again. So for me, you talk about a juvenile who gets into trouble, it is about finding the solutions of what's at home that caused this activity. And if it was a boneheaded decision, if the kids were just dumb and had a party and got busted when they shouldn't have, there are lessons to be learned for parents to be able to discuss with children. When children are making worse mistakes, there are lessons to be learned, and it's just a matter of making sure that I work with the parents, not only to get the children out of trouble, or whatever we want to call it, but also to make sure that they don't come back again.
Right.
Criminal lawyers don't want repeat business. I don't want repeat business. I don't want people coming back over and over again, especially young people.
Do you see a lot of that then,
or? I do. My practice, especially with DUIs, is I'm one of the lawyers in town. There's some fine lawyers who do DUI work in town. I'm one of those guys who gets the multiple DUIs. I'm one of the ones who get the 3s and the 4s, because a lot of lawyers don't like to deal with them, and they're not easy to deal with. Typically, when it comes to DUIs, a lot of people get scared to death and are never going to do it again. It's never going to happen again. Sometimes, though, when I'm with a client and explaining to them you can never put yourself in this position again, most people will heed that advice for a couple of years. And then after a couple of years, they realize, I can go have a beer with the guys. I can go have a glass of wine with my girlfriends tonight. This is silly. They can do it. I can do it. And it's those mistakes that lead into that 3rd or 4th. Most people survive a first DUI. Whether you get convicted, probation, whatever it is, or we beat it, no matter what happens, most people survive those as long as nobody was hurt. When you get number 2 and number 3, then nobody trusts you anymore. Mandatory jail sentences, multiple years loss of license. So it's about helping them as much as you possibly can as well.
What about like sealing like a record and whatnot to like hide like your first offense? How does that work?
Sure. So in the state of Florida, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement allows an individual, if they have not been convicted of a charge, and if the charge is not one of the enumerated exclusions, you can pretty much guess all the serious crimes you can't seal. But a lot of the basic stuff, if you're not convicted and you have never been convicted of a crime ever before, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, then you can petition the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to say, I want to seal this record. Or if it was totally dropped, I want to expunge this record. And in essence, what that does is it allows you, once it's sealed, to be able to say, have you ever been arrested before? No. Have you ever received a withhold? You can deny the existence of that event. And quite frankly, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, it was a wonderful tool. It's not as great of a tool today, unfortunately, as it used to be.
Right, because nowadays, like, there's still like those other websites and whatnot where you can find your mugshots and things out there.
That's exactly right. Now with the internet and the ease of, with Sheriff's Office providing photos and booking reports and everything else, it becomes a First Amendment issue. So these companies who put mugshots out there on a regular basis, they declare a First Amendment right. It was a public record. I get to put it out there. Some of them will remove it for you. Some of them will not, because it's a money-making operation, and the more people that they get hits from, obviously, as we all know, the more money that they make. And so sealing and expunging doesn't do today what it used to be able to do 2 decades ago.
Understood. So if someone wanted to reach you to hire you as their lawyer, how can they do that?
I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere. A lot of people know who I am, fortunately, but we have a website here in town, nicholspina.com, as well as our phone number, 353-3300. And we're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you call our office and nobody picks up, it actually gives you my cell phone number. Part of this practice is I have to be available for people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm not even sure when the last time was. My cell phone was turned off because a lot of people need help at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's when most people do stupid things. And so that's when I usually get a lot of phone calls. So, but our website's out there, LinkedIn, Facebook. We have a presence on the web as best as we possibly can with everybody else out there. But really, when it comes to a criminal practice, it's word of mouth, it's reputation. The lawyers who do well in a criminal practice are the ones who have represented people. They've done well. Somebody gets in trouble, I call my friend who's gotten in trouble.
Well.
And Nichols represented me, or this lawyer represented me, call that person. And that's how the majority of cases come about. Criminal lawyers don't really advertise because nobody's really expecting to go get in trouble with the law tomorrow. So it ends up being a matter of, who do I trust first? Once I call that person I trust, who did they have? And so building a good criminal practice takes a good amount of time. And once you've done it for long enough, I don't get too many calls from Facebook, and I don't get too many from the website. Most of the calls I get is just because I've been doing it for so long.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for watching at home. We'll see you next time on The Buzz.